The woman I helped build an empire for just laughed in my face. And now I was holding the match. I was lying in that cheap hotel bed, trying not to flinch while Brielle zipped up her jeans like I was just another meeting on her calendar. She didn't even ask if I was okay, just checked her smartwatch and said, "Tough quarter, huh?" I didn't reply. I just stared at the ceiling tile above her, water-stained and full of everything she pretended to forget. That morning, I had asked her for a raise. Not demanded, not threatened. Asked. I even waited until her cappuccino arrived, like a dumbass thinking that maybe timing still mattered. She laughed. Not just no, she laughed. Out loud, while buckling her belt. "Come on, Nate, you're mission critical, but strategy decisions are above your pay grade." 7 years. 7 years I gave that company. I built the system that ran her whole damn division. All the integrations, the pivots, the rewrites, the microservices. I stayed through the 2020 layoff wave, through 2 reorgs, through the merger that nearly killed half the product. And when things got bad, who kept it afloat? Me. And what did I get? A hotel room with industrial sheets, a cramp in my neck, and her words echoing in my skull like a joke I was too stupid to get. I sat up when the door clicked shut behind her. My mouth was dry. My skin itched from the detergent. I pulled the hotel notepad into my lap and just started scribbling. Timeline, architecture, contributor log. It wasn't grief, it wasn't rage, it was clarity. I wasn't just the builder, I was the origin, the code base, the design pattern, the initial logic engine. They all came from one place, me, and that patent, the one she flaunted at the summit last year, the one her assistant paraded on LinkedIn. She thought it was hers. It wasn't. She never had me sign it over. That's the part no one ever thinks about. The day you're grinding late into the night, trying to patch load errors from some broken third-party API, and legal forgets to loop back. That day, it matters. I had built the optimizer after a summit in Denver, during a week where their lead engineer got so hammered at the after party, he passed out in the hallway. I filed a draft to the USPTO 2 days later. No company logo, no NDA, just my name, my code, my signature. And then, life happened. Layoffs, budget cuts, a busted engagement. Getting told every quarter review that I wasn't leadership material. I forgot about it, not on purpose. Just one of those things that gets buried under 1,000 other fires. But now it looked like a loaded weapon. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to pull the trigger. I poured the overpriced minibar bourbon into a coffee mug and took a slow sip. It tasted like cough syrup and regret, but it did the job. Just enough burn to make the night feel less numb. I grabbed my ancient ThinkPad from the bottom of my suitcase, the black one with a cracked touchpad and a spacebar that stuck, the one I hadn't touched in years. I booted it up on instinct. Back in the early grind days, I used to carry that thing everywhere. Meetups, hackathons, coffee shops that stayed open past midnight. It still had a Red Bull sticker on the lid and a slight burn mark from when I accidentally left it on a hot plate in Denver. I let it wheeze its way through the boot cycle and watched the desktop flicker to life. There it was, a dusty old folder. Do not delete, old crap, double click. Inside were 10 or so directories, each more chaotic than the last. Early demos, abandoned startup ideas, a video file labeled drunkpitchfinal.mp4 I refused to open, but at the bottom sat 2 files I hadn't thought about in years. Load, optimizer, vv1.py, usp2, draft, nrv.pdf. I stared at them for a long minute. Then I opened the PDF. There it was. My name, plain as day. Filed January 28th, 2018. No company logo, no co-signers, no legal watermark, just me. I remembered now how it came together. Back then, their lead architect had passed out during the closing panel at that Denver summit, and I ended up in a cheap Airbnb, cleaning up the mess with 2 laptops and no support. I built the load balancer in 72 hours while eating Pringles with a spoon and listening to a fire alarm in the hallway that no one ever turned off. It was ugly, but it worked. Better than anything they had. Legal told me they'd file a clean version once we finalized the spec. I guess we never did. I didn't forget on purpose. Life just happened. That year was a blur. Layoffs, an acquisition scare, and a failed marriage proposal that turned into 6 months of sleeping on a couch with my name still on the lease. Meanwhile, They kept rolling my optimizer into the stack, dressing it up and calling it scalable. I blinked at the screen. What I had in front of me wasn't nostalgia, it was ammunition, so I got to work. For 5 straight nights, I lived on caffeine, black coffee, and burner ramen from a vending machine down the street. I booked a second hotel room 2 floors down under the name G Printer, and taped the Do Not Disturb sign on both doors. I named the machine Brother Printer just for fun. Routed my VPN through Oslo to make sure I didn't trigger any alerts on corporate surveillance software. Each night I rebuilt the optimizer from scratch, newer, faster, leaner, no legacy code, no company fingerprints. Version 2.2 by the time I was done. I spun up a private repo under an alias I'd used during college for torrenting old software manuals. The README was a single sentence. Not stolen, reclaimed. By day, I answered Slack messages from their product managers like nothing was wrong. By night, I wrote unit tests with my teeth clenched. And when the engine was stable, when version 2.2 passed every stress test I could throw at it, I emailed a single line to the contact form on artemistech.io, the same competitor our execs use to whisper about in risk reviews, like they were Voldemort. I own the code you've been chasing, and I can prove it. They replied the next day. A VP wanted to meet. She sounded skeptical, but curious. I sent her the filing. 3 hours later. This looks real. When can we talk? I looked around my hotel room, empty but for 2 mugs, 3 whiteboards, and a Bluetooth speaker still playing Aphex Twin from the night before. I smiled. I met Lena at a cafe in Soma that didn't have a name, just a steel logo and $7 drip. She picked the spot. I arrived 5 minutes early. She was already there, blonde, blunt cut, and dressed like someone who could drop a line of code and a legal grenade in the same breath. "Vaughn," she said, sliding her phone face down. "You look tired." "Been sleeping like someone with leverage," I replied, and handed her a flash drive across the table. She didn't touch it right away, just raised an eyebrow. "I don't do NDAs on first dates." "Don't need one. I own what's on there." She plugged it into her tablet and started scrolling, fingers moving fast. She paused at the draft. My name, the filing number, the 2018 date stamp. "This is real?" she asked without looking up. "All me, filed before they remembered legal existed. They've been writing it ever since." She scanned the optimizer script next. Cleaner, leaner, and annotated with the kind of comments only someone who wrote it from muscle memory would ever add. When she finally looked up, there was a shift in her expression. Less skepticism, more calculation. "You built the engine," she said flatly, "and they've been running it without rights for 5 years. Jesus!" She leaned back, one hand on her cup. "They never got an assignment?" "No, they asked. I just never signed." I sipped my coffee, which tasted like regret and citrus rind. "Guess it slipped through. Legal's a black hole." "Yours was the signature that never came," she murmured. I nodded. "Their entire back end still runs through it. Check the logs. You'll find half the calls use the same pattern I designed in 2.0, except bloated." Her eyes narrowed. "If what you're saying is true, this is one hell of a powder keg." "No," I said, sliding her another document. "It's a licensing opportunity." She glanced at it, then back at me. "Why us?" "Because I've seen what your team ships, and because you don't laugh when engineers ask about credit." There was a beat of silence. Then she smiled. Small, calculated, but real. "I'll have legal reach out, but off the record," she leaned in. "I've been waiting to see someone make them sweat." I stood. "Then I guess today's your lucky day." By the time I got back to the hotel, there was a licensing proposal in my inbox. Fair terms, no fluff. With it, a follow-up. Artemis' legal team was already combing through public DevRel forums and GitHub commits, flagging every instance of my code repurposed without attribution. By morning, I had handed over version 2.2. They ran a checksum, verified. It deployed to Artemis's QA servers like it had always belonged there, because it had. My engine, my logic, running proprietary, secure, and finally in the right hands. Then I did the thing I'd been waiting for. I drafted the email, short, precise. Subject: infringement notification. Body: please be advised, your infrastructure is currently running technology protected under U.S. patent number 62 839 19 Attached is a cease and desist, along with a summary of current violations. Best, Nathan R. Vaughn, patent holder. I timed it perfectly, 9:07 a.m., Tuesday, right as their VP of Ops logged in for his second meeting. According to the leak I'd seen last quarter, that's when all hands went live. It took them less than 2 hours to shut me out. Slack, revoked. Email, bounced. Calendar, wiped so clean it looked like I'd never existed. The official line was standard damage control. The real message was, we're scared, and we should be. I was on my second cup of terrible lobby coffee when the messages started. First it was Brielle's assistant. 3 texts, all variations of, can you hop on a quick call? Then Brielle herself. What did you do? Let's talk. This is salvageable. She even tried calling from her husband's burner number. I only knew because he texted me back in February to ask about frozen payroll scripts and signed off with, my wife says thanks. And then came the CTO. CTO, 8:14 a.m. You vindictive bastard. You just nuked a 40mm product line. That one made me laugh out loud. Vindictive? No, not yet. But Artemis wasn't done. An hour after I hit send on the cease and desist, Artemis's legal VP published a blog post titled, What Ownership Looks Like. It didn't mention names, but it didn't have to. Inside were API logs, commit hashes, and Git history screenshots that mapped exactly who had written what and when. Every line, every method, every dirty little trace. They even included DevOps receipts showing continuous integration, still pulling from repositories with my initials hard-coded into function names. It wasn't just elegant, it was surgical. And the real kicker? A tweet from Artemis's legal VP that simply read, can someone explain why a man with zero source contributions is claiming inventorship? It hit like a detonation. Their engineers, the ones still inside the castle, started leaking. Fast. On Reddit, one user posted a screenshot of an internal Slack conversation where Brielle said, don't worry, legal never followed up with him. It's already ours. The top comment read, hope you didn't bet the company on that. Another one posted a version control diff showing how my name was stripped out of commit logs sometime in late 2019. No explanation, just a silent erase and replace. That week, I got an email from an anonymous Proton Mail account. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a subject line, Crisis Protocol, Vaughn Fallout. Attached was an internal memo. I read it twice before printing it. Then I bought a cheap frame from CVS and hung it next to my ThinkPad. Action items, external counsel review, licensing exposure, prep messaging for shareholder meeting, quietly reassign blame. I didn't need to take them down. Their own engineers were doing it for me. They had built the castle without laying the foundation. Now they were realizing the bricks were borrowed, and the match was mine. By Friday, someone on the inside had leaked Brielle's personal notes from an exec retreat. I skimmed past the corporate buzzwords until I found the line. Nate will never leave. He's loyal, not ambitious. That one stayed with me. Monday at 9 a.m., sharp, I was seated at my desk like I was clocking in for a shift at a demolition site. 3 monitors lit, 2 espresso shots lined up. 1 live-streamed Q2 earnings call on mute. Their CEO wore his usual polished panic. A weak smile stretched over too many late nights. Brielle sat 3 seats over, airbrushed, stiff, pretending not to be sweating. But I was watching something else entirely. Their back end, still running my optimizer, the unlicensed, unacknowledged, very much now patented engine, began to crack. I'd warned them. I gave them 10 business days to migrate. They used 2. Probably assumed I was bluffing. I wasn't. At 9:06, Artemis flipped the switch. Version 2.2, my version, went live on their servers, clean and licensed. With one critical update, every call made to my optimizer without a valid signature returned junk, not errors, just bad data. By 9:10, latency tripled. By 9:12, one of their core services buckled. Dynamic pricing, the one they sold to every enterprise client as guaranteed adaptive logic. The logic was gone. Clients couldn't log in. Dashboards spun endlessly. Sessions hung. At 9:14, a Fortune 100 customer tweeted, excited to partner with Artemis, clean code, better performance. The timing wasn't coincidence. Devs started pinging one another in group chats, posting screenshots of memory graphs and system crashes. Someone finally ran a stack trace and posted a screenshot to a private Discord. That's when it happened. A dev recognized the code. Holy shit, is this from Vaughn's old 2018 demo? It has the same variable typo, load manger instead of load manager. They never even renamed it. Within minutes, someone dropped a link to a conference video where I demoed version 1.3, same logic structure, same typo. The receipts were live. LinkedIn caught fire. My inbox started buzzing with messages. You free for coffee this week? If you're not already locked in with Artemis, we'd love to talk. You might want to trademark the engineer who burned the castle she built. It's trending. Back on the stream, their CTO's neck was visibly flushed. He leaned over to whisper something to Brielle, who didn't look up from her phone. Inside their internal Slack, which, yes, I still had a backdoor into from the legacy build tools I'd written, the CTO typed, "Who the hell filed nothing?" Legal responded 2 minutes later, "You told us not to bother with him." Silence. They'd built their empire on my work, and now that empire was crashing in real time, not from sabotage, but from negligence. Their stock dropped 4% by 9:30, 7% by tens. By 11:13 a.m., a Bloomberg analyst tweeted, "Unlicensed core IP confirmed, patent violation pending, watching this closely." By noon, trading froze, 11% down. I closed the earnings stream. They'd officially stopped taking questions. The CEO's final words were robotic. "We're addressing technical inconsistencies and exploring new partnership opportunities." Translation: the fire is spreading and we can't find the damn extinguisher. I didn't toast. I didn't cheer. I just opened my ThinkPad, pulled up the patent file again, and stared at the name on the header. Nathan R. Vaughn, inventor, author, architect. They thought I was some mid-level developer, some reliable cog with a good memory and bad timing. But that morning, they remembered who I was. They filed 3 days later. PDF scan, 79 pages, allegations of sabotage, IP coercion, breach of duty, and deliberate interference with strategic infrastructure. I laughed before I even finished the first paragraph. They thought they had me cornered, thought I'd panic, scramble, maybe even settle. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't alone anymore. Artemis's legal team didn't blink. I forwarded the complaint at 9:02 a.m. By 10:17, their response was sitting in my inbox, annotated in red. Clause 1, patent predates employment. Clause 14, no IP transfer agreement executed. See missing, Form 327. Clause 28, discovery request includes internal Slack logs, meeting recordings, and performance reviews. And tucked neatly into their counterbrief was a transcript from the all-hands Zoom I recorded 6 months ago. The one where Brielle looked directly into the camera and said, "This isn't about credit, Nate. It's about team wins. Equity's a distraction." I remembered smiling politely back then, like a good little cog. Now that clip was Exhibit B. Their CEO went on CNBC that afternoon, looking like someone had stuffed a live wire into his collar. He stumbled through a soundbite about legacy contributors and the importance of intellectual honesty. His forehead glistened under the lights. "We value all our engineers," he said, dead behind the eyes. Meanwhile, Dev Twitter was having a field day. Someone unearthed old screenshots of Brielle tweeting in 2020. "Ownership is earned, not given. If you want equity, be indispensable." And someone replied, "Looks like Nate was." That week, they dropped the lawsuit, quietly. No press release, no public apology, just a silent retraction filed through their lawyers. The only sign anything had happened was a redacted note that popped up in the footer of their website 2 days later. Built for scale. That was it. That was their surrender flag. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but really, I just felt done. The fire had eaten everything it needed to eat. The rest was just ash. Until Thursday, when the exit started. First was Eliza, the lead platform engineer I trained during the big infrastructure shift in 21. Then 2 of the DevOps seniors who helped me debug their CI/CD stack when the CTO was off golfing in Tahoe. And then Kyle, front-end lead, Slack shit poster, and the guy who once pulled me aside during a hackathon to say, "If they screw you, I'm out." Each of them posted their resignation letters publicly. Each of them referenced ethical misalignment. Each of them tagged me. I didn't gloat. I didn't retweet. I just messaged each one the same thing. I remember what you fixed. They never did. Let me know if you want to build something better. I printed the email on thick cardstock, the kind you'd use for a wedding invite or a fancy certificate. Subject: termination of employment. Reason: gross negligence, IP conflict, reputational damage. I folded it into a navy envelope, sealed it with a strip of red wax I didn't need, and dropped it in a bubble-lined courier pouch with a USB stick inside. Sharpied on the drive: "You should have paid me." No note, no return address, just his name. He got buzzed out at 3:43 p.m. on a cloudy Thursday. I was across the street, leaning on a parking meter with a cup of gas station coffee in my hand, watching the revolving door spin like a scene from a corporate funeral. He stepped out slow, confusion on his face, like he'd expected a going-away party instead of a security escort. Still wore his badge clipped to his belt, a final touch of denial. Then he saw me. He froze, looked around like he wasn't sure if he was being pranked, then locked eyes with me across the street, mouthed something. I didn't bother lip-reading, just folded my arms. No smile, no anger, just done. He didn't cross over, just stood there holding the envelope with both hands like it was radioactive. Then he walked away, slow and bitter, without turning back. That moment, better than any pay raise, better than the bonus they dangled every year and never delivered, better than every all-hands meeting where they called me critical and then let me sit quietly at the corner of the photo. Because for once, I wasn't invisible, and I wasn't holding the consequences. They were. I turned and walked the other way, past the cafe where Brielle once pitched me on thinking like an owner, past the co-working space where I first built the optimizer, past everything I used to mistake for belonging. I thought it was the end. But cockroaches crawl. 2 weeks later, Lena forwarded me a press release. Former exec funds disruptive startup to challenge Artemis dominance. New platform promises full rebuild of modern infrastructure, from scratch. I didn't need to read it twice. He was back. Same swagger, different banner. They'd rebranded him as a visionary technologist and put a new CEO in front. But I could see the fingerprints in every overhyped sentence. They were trying to copy what we'd already finished building. Again. I closed the article, let them try. They called it Rebuilt from Scratch. Their press release dropped on a Thursday like they were daring us to notice. A fresh architecture, streamlined performance, and, my personal favorite, independently developed from the ground up. It was a lie dressed in buzzwords. I knew it, Lena knew it, and anyone who had touched version 1.0 of my optimizer knew it. They hadn't rebuilt anything. They'd cobbled together a Frankenstein of outdated middleware, open-source libraries, and a UI so bloated it made Slack on a Chromebook look elegant. Artemis didn't blink. We dropped version 3.0 that same week. Faster, smarter, lighter on compute. Fully licensed, legally bulletproof, and optimized for the future they were still pretending to understand. I gave early access to 12 of their biggest enterprise clients. Beta only, feature-locked, NDA optional. Within 30 days, 8 of them jumped ship. That wasn't the headline, though. The real kicker came from a leaked email their strategic visionary sent to his board. We're confident in the product roadmap and will outperform Artemis through aggressive differentiation. That was Friday. Monday morning, their lead VC pulled funding. Lack of IP clarity, the memo said. Unacceptable legal exposure, no forward path. I didn't have to do anything, just kept building. I ran into him at a tech gala the following month. The kind of black tie nonsense where startups sponsor their own champagne walls and no one knows what the company actually does. He was working the room, blazer sharp, smile cracked just enough to suggest he was trying not to drown in it. He spotted me by the bar, walked right up, no hesitation, like the months between us hadn't happened. "You win," he said, voice flat. I swirled the bourbon in my glass, looked him dead in the eye. This wasn't a game. He blinked. For a second I thought he'd say something cutting, something clever. But he just gave me a half smile, turned, and disappeared into the crowd. I walked to the stage 15 minutes later. My keynote wasn't about him. It wasn't about revenge or litigation or code bases. It was about value, The kind you build line by line, not the kind you steal and repackage. The lights were bright, the mic was hot, but I was calm. Afterward, a junior dev cornered me near the snack table. She looked maybe 22, clutching a lanyard like it was a lifeline. "Is that the guy who laughed at your raise?" she asked, nodding toward the back of the room. I smiled. "Yeah," I said. And he thought that was the end of the story. The room was full of applause, but it wasn't the kind that made you feel like a god. It was quieter, earned. I stood center stage under the amber lights, one hand resting on the podium, the other gripping the edge like a guy who still half expected someone to yank the mic away. But they didn't, because this time, it was mine. I had just told the story, not the drama, not the headlines, not the flameout. The real story. How a product got built in the shadows, how credit became currency, how ownership got traded like lunchroom favors until someone finally said no. That someone was me. And behind the polite conference laughter and polished name tags, I saw it. The looks. Not pity, not awe, recognition. Engineers who had been there, who had stayed late for someone else's win, who had built entire features no one remembered their name for. After the talk, someone asked during the Q&A, if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be? I didn't even pause. "Sign the patent," I said, "then light the match." They laughed, but not all of them. Some nodded like they had been holding a match of their own for years and just needed someone else to strike the first one. I packed up slow after the keynote. I let people shake my hand, toss their cards at me, whisper things like bold move and legend status. I smiled, but it all felt far away. That night, I went home, to a small apartment with a good desk and a dog-eared copy of Refactoring on the shelf. I ordered Thai, sat on the floor, and opened the ThinkPad. Same boot-up wheeze, same stubborn spacebar, same ancient folder labeled "Do Not Delete." Old crap. I opened it, just looked, not to double-check, not to reminisce, to remind myself. That laptop was never the weapon. I was. They thought it was over. They thought they could bury me in NDAs and bullshit titles and strategic ambiguity. They thought the fire would burn itself out. But it didn't. Because it was never about revenge. It was about reclamation.